My first name is Eliza. I was in Korea for 3 years, between 2009 and 2012. I applied to teach in a rural elementary school through a government-funded program, and I applied through the consulate in Toronto, Canada. I was there for about 3 years. I was teaching for about 6 months, and then for 2 years, I did the recruitment side. So I got to know a lot of the inner workings and the application process, as well as the screening process for screening for a number of the public school and government funded teacher recruitment programs. So I did that for about 2 years. The last time I was in contact with stuff like that, with relating to the application process, was in 2012. It's my understanding that a lot of it hasn't changed yet. So a lot of the information here, some of it may have changed a little bit in terms of the requirements and some of, I suppose, the criteria for a number of these programs. But generally, the application process doesn't really vary between the programs at all. So the documents that they ask for, as well as what they're looking for, is pretty much the same. Seeing since at the end of the day, all of these programs fall under the purview of the Ministry of Education. So the first thing I'll talk about are some of basically the four, what I consider the four major government public school programs. First one is probably the most well known, is EPIK, which is the short for English program in Korea. They have a sister program, which I won't quite discuss because the status of that program is in limbo at the government level. But there is an additional one that works actually quite closely with EPIK. The second one is very similar. It's called GEPIK, GEPIK. So it is basically the same as the EPIK program, but it only operates in the Gyeonggi province, which is the region where the city of Seoul is located. Third one is the English Teachers in Seoul, ETIS. Most people know it better as SMOE, which is the Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education. This program only operates within the city of Seoul. So if you want to teach in Seoul and you want to get into the public sector, SMOE or ETIS is your best bet, is your best solution. Some of the placements that SMOE does is actually done by EPIK. So those two programs, you can actually apply to SMOE at the same time while you're applying to EPIK. The last one is probably not as well known, but it is one of the most reliable, I suppose, public sector positions you can get into if you're not really concerned on being in close to Seoul. It's called the Jeollanam-do Language Program, JLP. It's exclusive to the South Jeolla province, so it's basically at the southern end of the country. The main difference with this particular program is that it does put you in the chances for placements in more remote and rural areas are higher. For example, because South Jeolla province has a lot of islands, and there are population centers within those islands, and there are schools there, so you actually might get placed on an island, essentially. But in lieu of that, your financial, I suppose, compensation is a little bit higher in return, because your cost of living will increase due to the fact that you're isolated on an island. So those are the four main programs, public school programs. A lot of people have asked about what's the main difference between public sector and private sector. I guess and I guess also what are the pros and cons. The main pro that I seem to have heard from a lot of the people around me who've been in both public and private is that there's more job security in the public sector, because the program is directly administered and overseen by the government. Everything is relatively quite transparent. So your contract, your duties, your expectations, everything is laid out. It's very transparent. Whereas in the private sector, there are a few risks if you get in with the wrong recruiter, or maybe the hagwon, might misrepresent itself. Who knows? Sometimes things happen, unfortunately. But public sector, the government's involved, so there is a sense of transparency there. The other thing is benefits. The public sector tends to give more, I suppose, paid vacation days. It can range anywhere from 7 to about 18, in some cases up to 20, which can essentially be a full month of paid time off. Whereas in some of the hagwons, they may actually restrict that. I think the most I've seen from my own experiences is about 10 maximum. But regularly, most teachers in the public sector get anywhere from like 10 to 18 days off on an average. The other would be working hours, 9 to 5 or 8:30 to 6 usually. So basically school hours, Mondays to Fridays, no weekends. Whereas for hagwons, you're working in the evenings, so you're usually starting at around 3 or 4 and going all the way up to 11 o'clock at night. So for people who are looking for more of a work-life balance, hagwons might not always be the best solution, because it means you're basically working at night and then you're sleeping during the day. So those are the main ones that I've heard and have experienced, and after having a talk with a lot of people in both sides. In regards to the application process, the application documents are not too different from when you're applying to the private sector. And in between the couple of different programs, there are very few like variations here and there. But because a lot of these documents also kind of do double duty as your visa documents, so they're pretty much the same. Generally basic, first things first, is that the last four is your completed application form. Many of them also have a section for medical self-assessment. So they're asking you about, some voluntary declarations about, certain medical conditions. So are you allergic to anything? Are you taking any medication? Do you require any sort of frequent checkups, regular checkups with the doctor? Those kind of things. It's not really recommended to kind of omit anything on there. I mean, you might not want to disclose certain things, but it is in your best interest to be as upfront as possible, because if down the line that they find out something and they knew you were hiding it, that's going to cause more problems down the line. So it might seem a little bit invasive for a lot of people, asking, oh, why do I have to, give them, medical information? I mean, they're not doing it to be invasive, but they want to know, like, straight up front, like, are there any sort of medical issues that will come up while you are under their supervision? Passport photos. I would say when you come to Korea, you're going to need them. So try to bring at least 6, 8, 10, maybe it's up to you. But usually minimum 6 is a good number, because you're going to be needing it for the application, you're going to need it for the visa, you're going to need it for a couple of other documents when you get into Korea. And then if you decide to stay there longer, it's just good to have, because trying to get passport photos while you're in Korea is a trial in and of itself. So just bring them with you, probably be a better option. You'll need generally 2 copies of your sealed transcript. If they are delivered to you directly, and you will be submitting it to the application office instead of having it sent directly, please do not open them. The seal is very important. And if your university is asking you why it needs to be sealed, that just has to do with verification. They want to make sure nothing has been tampered with. So even if it's just sealed and someone's signature is on like the envelope, that's perfectly fine. It's just do not open them, because as soon as it's opened, they will not accept it and you will have to get other ones. 2 is usually okay, but I would say have at least 1 or 2 extra lying around, just in case. Things sometimes do happen. Obviously, a lot of these programs will require you to have completed your full degree program. So having multiple copies of your diploma is a good option. They do not want the original, so please do not send the originals ever. That's for you to keep. Some people have actually sent me originals in the past when I was processing applications, and it was a trial to send it back to them. So please keep the original with you. The notarization and the apostille for the American side. Notarization can be done by any notary public. Check with any sort of government departments that might offer that service for you for a fee, because if you do go to a lawyer, you're going to have to pay the fee, and it might be substantially higher. The apostille for the diploma can be done at the state level, whereas the criminal record check has to be done, for the Americans anyway, through the Department of State. But the apostille for the copy of your diploma can be done at the state level. That's fine. The criminal record check, EPIC does not accept state level criminal record checks, so you will have to get the FBI criminal record check, which is supposedly supposed to cover the entire country. It requires fingerprints, so it is most likely you will have to contact your local or state law enforcement office in order to get the fingerprints and have it sent off to the FBI. This document is the hardest thing to get because it takes so long, and there are so many people who apply for this. The FBI is aware that this document is a thing that is required for the teaching programs in Korea, and so they're very much aware of it, and the timelines to get these documents is anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks if you're lucky. And it's going to take equally that much time to get the apostille from the State Department. We also recommend that you get more than one. It might be expensive, but it is a good idea to get more than one, because when you're sending documents, you never know. Because I personally don't have any experience in applying to the private sector myself, on the public sector side, other hand, a lot of the programs require to submit a lesson plan that you have created. So basically, a lesson plan would be like, what would you teach the children in a specified period of time? Elementary schools is usually about half an hour, 40 minutes. Middle schools is about 45 minutes, and for high school, it's about like an hour. The lesson plans, you can do whatever lesson you want. Like, the topic doesn't matter, but they want to see, can you put together a full lesson to teach, like a class? So they usually require that. Resume, make sure it's updated. They require 2 letters of recommendation usually, sometimes 3, but 2 is minimum. 1 academic, and if you are currently employed or have recently been employed, 1 for employment. If you cannot get that, someone who is not a family member who can, give a detailed account of you as a person, as your character, as well as your certain traits, is also acceptable as well. EPIC and SMOA sometimes require like an essay or writing sample. Some others may or may not. Things might have changed, but sometimes they will require a writing sample. So like a brief personal essay, like introduction about who you are, why you're applying to this program, and what's your interest in teaching, education, things like that. The application process, and as well as getting the documents, sending the documents, and doing all that is going to cost money. So you got to kind of budget into the fact that, you might have to get, if you don't have a copy of your diploma, you're going to have to get those. You're going to have to get multiple copies of your transcript from your university or college, and fees for your visa processing, sending out your documents, all of that. You want to budget at least a good around like $200 or so in total for the documents and fees for this entire process. Do send everything with a tracking number. If you can send documents in batches, that's probably the best idea. But send everything with tracking numbers. And if you can, make sure to get signatures on it as well. That will protect your documents, and it will also make sure that you can always, at least if the documents do get lost in transit or something happens, there is some record of what happened to it, where into the void it went. So sending it with a tracking number is very, very strongly recommended.
All right. So what about degree requirements for public schools?
Basic is a bachelor's program. It's like a bachelor's. EPIC and a lot of the programs do not take 2-year programs. So associate's degrees, Anything less than a 4-year degree program, not accepted. The minimum is a bachelor's. For EPIC, SMOE, the TESOL certificate, or TEFL, so teaching English to foreign languages, that has now become mandatory. A couple years back, it was not. You could actually have prior teaching experience, and that would actually qualify you to apply for EPIC, and still get up a little bit higher in terms of like the pay grade. But now TEFL has become mandatory.
So you don't have to have an English degree or an education degree to work in a public school.
No, your major of study doesn't matter.
Okay.
But having a 4-year degree plus your TEFL is it's the basic requirement. If you don't have both of those, you are not qualified to apply for EPIC, which also disqualifies you from SMOE as well.
Okay.
As going back to the documents, for people who have never traveled abroad, or there is less than 6 months left on your passport, first thing to do is to get that done, because you do have to send in a copy of your passport, the photo page of your passport. So if you do not have it, or there's less than 6 months, please get that renewed or apply for one and get that first. The second thing is obviously your criminal record, for Americans anyway, because that document is going to take a long, long time, because you have to send it to the FBI, they have to get it, they have to process it, they have to send it back to you, and then you have to send it to the State Department, wait for them to do the apostille, and then send it back to you. And then you have to send that off to Korea, usually. So that is a lot of time. That's a couple months. So that has to be kind of taken into account, because the criminal record checks cannot also be any older than 6 months. So if you do have one from a prior one, that's fine. If it's an FBI one, if it hasn't been apostilled, you can send it off, but it cannot be older than 6 months, unfortunately. For Canadian applicants, Canada doesn't adhere to the Apostille Convention, but we do still need to do criminal record checks. The most preferred one is to get it done through our federal police, which is RCMP, the Mounties, the guys in the funny uniforms, hats. You can actually still do it through your local law enforcement office, because Canada's databases are pretty much unified. As long as your criminal record check your name is searched through the national database, it can still be done through the municipal ones. And then you will have to take that to the consulate and get it authenticated there. They will have to do the authentication at the consulate office. If you do not live near one, you will have to mail it off to them and have it authenticated by the closest consulate to where you are. What else regarding the documents? Just try to be diligent and double check everything. Have multiple copies for yourself, and always do keep track of your documents, where they are, because you never know what may happen during transit. For a lot of these programs, especially EPIC, it is very highly recommended you apply directly through them. There are recruiters who do accept applications on behalf of EPIC, but EPIC themselves prefer that any prospective candidates apply directly through them. So that is also the safest way to go. Also, because they're processing the application directly, there's less, I suppose, lag in terms of how they receive your documents, because recruiters generally receive batches of documents, and then they wait until they get a certain amount, and then they send it off. So if you are applying through a recruiter, that might be more local. There is, for some people, that is a benefit, but the one drawback is that EPIC or whatever program may receive your documents later, as opposed to someone who is directly speaking with the EPIC office. JLP, they generally work through, I think, 1 or 2 specific recruiters. Like I said, they're not very well known. but the recruiters who work with JLP, they have been working together for a very long time. So the process is actually relatively quite smooth. And at Gepic, you can also directly apply through the Gepic as well. So, and if you have any questions, never hesitate to email questions. You know, the people who are the coordinators who are processing the documents, they want you to ask questions. If there's something that's not clear, ask questions. Just don't expect an immediate response. The number of people who are working behind the scenes in processing those applications is not as many as you think. So they, at any given moment, one coordinator might be juggling anywhere from 40 to 80 applications by themselves. It is a lot of applications. Epic does placements throughout the entire country. That's several hundreds of positions. So don't be surprised if you don't get a response quickly. And also, there is a big time difference if you're not in Korea. From the East Coast, it's a 14-hour time difference, and they're liaising. They're working for applicants from 7 different countries. So the time zone difference is all over the map. It can be anywhere from 2 hours from Australia to 14 hours in the United States. So just keep that in mind. And they only have only certain hours in the day when they're in the office. So just don't be surprised if you don't get a response back very quickly. Once your application has been processed and you have passed through the initial document screening, they will contact you to set up an interview. It's going to be done usually either through phone or Skype if you are doing it directly through the Epic office. Once you have determined this time and a date, just double check that everyone is on the same page in terms of what time they're doing it. Usually they will work with the candidate's time zone. So if I'm in Korea and the coordinator will tell you the time in your actual time zone. So if you're in New York, they will tell you, say, like 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So just double check and make sure it is in your actual time zone, because if you miss the interview, trying to get that rescheduled in a short amount of time is not easy. Make sure that before the interview, find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted, and that any audio video equipment you're using is functioning. Nobody likes to have interviews stalled because of technical difficulties. Technology doesn't always cooperate. It happens, but just double check and make sure everything is all fully set up, and dress professionally if you can. It's only a video conference, but remember, these people are going to ultimately be the one who will decide whether you continue on to the next stage or not. So it is important to make a good impression, even if it's only over Skype. So dressing professionally and having good etiquette is important. The other part about this one I should have mentioned earlier with regards to benefits as compared to the difference between the public and the private sector is that the public sector does give you a bit of a, I suppose, financial cushion from the beginning, because when you come in get a contract through a private institution, all of the costs up front are borne by you. So sometimes, and there are situations where you might not be able to immediately go into like an apartment, or you might not bring enough cash with you. That might put you in a difficult position. All of these programs usually collect all of their candidates first at the airport, and then they put them through orientation for about first 2 weeks or so, anywhere from 9 days to 2 weeks. And during that time, all of the costs are borne by the government, basically. Hotel, so your lodgings, food, all of that is covered for while you're orientation. And then the good thing about the public sector is that by the time you are, I suppose, going to your school, your apartment's already ready for you. So apartments, like utilities, internet, all of that's generally pretty much ready for you. Because while you're in orientation, the teacher who was at the school before you has already left. So there's less of an issue on that front. Also, as soon as you arrive and you have a bank account set up and ready to go, they deposit money for you. I believe Epic usually provides a 300,000 won, which is around like $300. Kind of like, I suppose, like it's a bonus, I guess. It's a signing bonus, essentially. And then once that happens, usually your entrance allowance also comes in at the same time. So that will actually put you in positive in terms of funds. So before your first paycheck comes in, which is usually at the end of the month, I think the 25th, but it might vary. So there's that. And during orientation, it is relatively thorough. So it gives you some time to get used to Korea, its culture, and and the people. It'll also kind of get you used to how, I suppose, pace of life in Korea. This is the one thing that I always tell people is, even if you're not very social, try to make a few social connections. Like, talk to people. Because there are times where the cultural difference in Korea, as opposed to, America, Canada, wherever, it's going to hit you. Sooner or later, the cultural differences hit. And knowing at least one or somebody else who is in the same boat as you, that you can talk to, and you can just be like, man, I really wish I can go for that burger, or, let's go to the bar and let's go watch the football game, something, anything, right? Having that kind of support system has gotten a lot of people through some really rough times. So that's really important. So even if you're not the most social person on the planet, at the very least, usually you're roomed in pairs anyway, at least chat up your roommate, learn their names, where they're placed, and just kind of get to know at least a couple people. That social connection is really important.
Now, how many teachers are usually placed at each public school?
There's generally one teacher per school. They don't do double unless the school is really, really big. But Korea doesn't do like super big schools a lot either anyway. But as for the number of teachers in a specific region, that varies every recruitment cycle, because it depends on how many people have renewed their contracts.
Because I'm thinking in regards to the socializing part, since you only basically have yourself at the school, and sometimes it seems like the Korean teachers are less likely to they might be shy about talking to you because they might not know that much English, and so having the support system of the other foreign teachers, getting to know them during the orientations, I think is much more important for public schools than for the private schools, because you're working with 2, 3, 4, 5 other foreign teachers every day.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, no, the social aspect is really important. For example, when I was there for the first time on my orientation, I made a lot of good friends, and they were all actually in different parts of the country. This is what makes Facebook and your cell phone and this one app called KakaoTalk really, really important. These are basically gonna be your social lifelines in Korea. We basically used Facebook a lot. So everyone at orientation added pretty much the other half of orientation to their Facebook. And this is how the social connections are important, because it gets you out of your zone, and you can go travel to go meet your friends, even if they're in a different region. Then you get to see different parts of the country. You get to go see someone that you've made friends with, and then you get that sense of home. You get that sense of social, that social interaction, and you also get to see different parts of the country. There's really no way to lose on that front.
Yeah. There's another app that I found while I was in Korea called Meetup, which is also great for finding people that have similar interests as you. So you can go. There's a lot of like hiking and outdoorsy groups for Korea, and you can meet up with people who have similar interests, make friends with them, but you can also, not just foreigners, but with Koreans, because I would go to language discussion exchange things, and I'd be talking to foreigners and to Koreans. And so that's another Facebook. There's a bajillion meetup groups on Facebook, and then there's also the Meetup app that are great for socializing.
Yeah, definitely. If the people that you did orientation really don't meet your fancy, There's so many expats from all over the world living in all corners of Korea. You'd be fine. You can find a random foreigner probably in some mountain remote village eventually. So yeah, if the people you did orientation really aren't your thing, but like you have like a specific interest, go on Facebook and type in that interest, add in Korea or add in your city, and you'll find people. And there is something to be said about Korean people being a little bit hesitant to in speaking in English with foreigners. It's a cultural thing. It's also kind of like a mentality thing. Koreans are like they can be really shy about certain things if they're not very good at it. They're kind of afraid that they're being judged or they might be made fun of. So even though they might actually be understanding a good chunk of what you're saying, they might not say anything to you because, they're afraid that they will not be understood. So on that front, the only thing you can really do is patience and just get comfortable with that person, and eventually they'll open up, and then they will, naturally, to come to speak with you more. So, and orientation, ask questions, whatever questions you have, even if you think it might be stupid, ask them anyway. Because when you're at orientation, you're gonna meet people like who are in the same situation as you, but the staff who are at orientation, they're the kind of like they work for the Epic office, so they act as bridges between you, your school, and the program. And because a lot of them have actually gone through the program themselves or they have done similar work in Korea, they have been through what you have been through. Just in different shades and maybe slightly different, but general experience in Korea, they've gone through it. So if you have a question, ask it anyway. You might think it's stupid, you might think it's small and petty, it's not a big deal, but ask it anyway. Because there's no better time to ask than at that point. And then, because all the coordinators are fluent English speakers. And I actually did hang out with a number of them. We've worked together for a bit. So, but whatever questions you have, ask them. I mean, you can ask them and they'll be able to give you an answer. Once you, before you go into orientation, like in Korea anyway, there might be some terms that'll come out, and these are terms, or there's certain specific terms to this particular subset of a job that will come up very often. Terms like mentor teacher, like POE, co-teacher, things like that. So it gets explained to you a little bit later on down the line, but the basic gist of it is your mentor teacher is the teacher who is in charge of supervising you at your school. So that is one of the teachers at your school. Usually it's the English teacher who will be working with you and who will also act as the point of contact between yourself and the school, and as well as the program coordinator's office, and also like the local office of education. So SMOE is short form for Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education, and then that's only because Seoul itself is designated as like a city, so that is administered by the federal government. Whereas this provinces like Chungnam Province or South Jeolla Province, they have provincial offices of education. So they're kind of like regional school boards. Your contract that you sign is actually with your regional or your metropolitan office of education, not through EPIC. EPIC is an intermediary agent that does the recruitment and placement, but ultimately your contract is actually with the provincial office of education, or the metropolitan office of education. So if there's any issues with regards to your contract or certain things, the information will actually come from your provincial office of education. More commonly, you'll hear POE a lot, or your MOE. And the other person that you'll become very familiar with while you're doing the teaching program is your co-teacher. So this teacher is the person who will assist you in the classroom. Not everyone might be assigned a co-teacher, but sometimes you are, and that person will be with you in the classroom and helping you with your teaching duties with during the English periods. And they may not always be the same person as your mentor teacher, but sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Just be aware of that. But they will be able to communicate with you in English. So these are terms that will become more familiar to you as you go through the program and go through the application process. And on Facebook, there's a lot of different groups of former EPIC teachers and former SMOE teachers. You can seek them out on Facebook. There's a lot of groups for them, open groups. So you can always join those groups and toss questions out there, and they'll be able to give you more of a breakdown on what certain things are like. Once you get into the school, the public school, I suppose, inside culture is a little bit different than the private sector. Private sector comes down to business. A lot of these hagwon, at the end of the day, all the private hagwons institutions are businesses. So they're offering a service in exchange for money, obviously. Whereas for the schools, it's a different aspect. This is education. This is your basic foundational education for your children. So the approach is a little bit different. Once you have become been placed at a school and you start working, you become part of that family. The school teachers, they're family, and they treat each other like family, and they take care of each other like family. And once you become part of that, you'll get help no matter what you need. Even despite the language barrier, once you're a teacher and then you become part of that school, it doesn't matter if you speak Korean or not. You're a teacher and you're part of that family. So that's something that is a little bit different. It might be a little bit hard to get used to, but it's an incredible support system. If you're having problems, if you're having some difficulties, you need some advice. The teachers will be able to help you. Even if you're having trouble with daily things where's the closest bank, or I need to go to the post office and do these things, you can ask your mentor teacher. You can ask any other teacher. They'll be able to help you. Usually your mentor teacher will go with you to take care of some administrative stuff like bank account, cell phone, and getting what's called your alien registration card. This is your official identification card while you're in Korea. So this is gonna be your primary form of ID when you're in Korea. So once you get one, please do not lose it. You don't have to carry around your passport anymore afterwards, so that's a good thing. But this is kind of your primary form of ID. So, and that will also allow you to sign up for pretty much anything. So you can sign up for online shopping portals, your cell phones, multiple cell phones, internet, bank accounts, whatever. You could take out a car loan if you wanted to, get a car, whatever. But that ID is kind of it's very vital for you while you're in Korea. The other thing that will be vital for you is your smartphone. Korea has transitioned over fairly well into NFC payments, so your cell phone has also become your wallet, essentially speaking. Once you open up a bank account, you do get a debit card. You do get the bank book. It's it's a book thing, and then you feed it into a machine, and it kind of basically gives you the entire record of all your transactions. You can use it, you can not use it, it's fine, but they give it to you anyway. But Korea has transitioned over fairly well into NFC payments, so you actually can not always carry around your wallet as long as you have the proper apps installed on your phone. You can use your cell phone as your transit pass and your credit card, your debit card, and and then that's pretty much. And also, obviously, it'll be your phone. So that's kind of, I suppose, one of those things that are vital to going through your day-to-day life in Korea, no matter where you are. It can be in the city, you can be in the rural thing, you can be in a rural region, same thing. Backtracking a little bit to the documents regarding the criminal record check. Once you get it, actually take a look at it and verify it. And if anything comes up on your criminal record check, the first thing you must do is speak with the local or state law enforcement office and inquire about getting it expunged if it's old enough. However, because any sort of a arrest or conviction on your criminal record check will immediately disqualify you from getting an E2 visa. So your application process stops right there. Anything on the criminal record check will pretty much stop your application process. They will not accept it any further. So it is important that that the CRC is the first thing you get, and you double check it and make sure that there is nothing on it. If there is anything on it, you will have to speak with law enforcement and then get that cleared up before you continue on with your application process. There have been instances where people have sent criminal record checks to the application offices with an arrest or conviction on it, and still had it apostilled. Their applications were immediately rejected on the spot. It says very specifically on the EPIC website and also for the visa guidelines that you cannot have any form of a conviction or an arrest on record if you wish to apply for a visa. And for any correspondences you have with the program coordinators and for people who are processing applications, be polite and be professional, and be diligent. Follow up if you need to. Just keep in mind that it may take them a few days to get to your emails. They get so many emails from people who are in the program as well as people who are applying to be in the program. So they handle a lot of emails coming in and out. They also handle a lot of phone calls. So usually when you send an email, you have a question, give them a couple days, maybe 2-3 days, and see if you get a response. If you don't, then just send them a quick email, hi, that you're following up with your previous email, and just restate your question. As for your transcript, for EPIC, their guideline is that their minimum GPA is 2.8 on a 4.0 scale. That's kind of like their minimum cutoff. If you have had any issues in your academic history that may show up on your transcript, be prepared to have an explanation for that during your interview. Not everyone has like a very solid, consistent academic career. Things happen. Some people might have had some family issues, they might have had some personal issues, whatever the reason may be. If there is a significant, I suppose, hiccup in your academic performance within while you were getting that degree, just know that it will be noted, and even though they may not ask for it, anticipate that question anyway and have an explanation ready. I received a transcript for someone who had been on academic suspension for a year, and it was noted on their transcript. And when I asked that particular candidate about why they'd been put on academic suspension, their answer was not what we expected, and it was not something that we were prepared to accept, so we rejected that application. So it's important that if anything has happened, that you're honest and straight up about it. Because you might think that it might work against you, and that's not something anyone can really ever say for sure, but it is important to be honest about it. And now going back to culture within the schools, like I've said before, it's kind of like a family, and family, is a bit of a complicated situation. For a lot of foreigners, the culture within Korean culture and the sense of community in the workplace might not always be something that they're used to, but it is unique in and of its own, and sometimes you may be asked to do things that are not officially a part of your duties. They might ask you to help with extracurricular things, they might ask you for help here and there, which are not explicitly stated in your contract. My advice is to not say no right off the bat. If you have some time, and it's not really going to be, that big of an impact on you as like your duties or whatever, I would say consider saying yes. It does go a very long way in getting you more comfortable and making other people more comfortable with you as a teacher, and as part of that family. And it helps build relationships, and that's very important. So, and in terms of building relationships, there's a lot of like social outings, like school dinners that happen. In the private sector, it happens as well. It's just one of those things. It's a social thing. Usually, well, pretty much most of the time, there's alcohol involved. Drinking is a thing in Korea. So if you don't drink a lot or you don't drink at all, just tell somebody that. Tell your mentor teacher, tell somebody that you don't drink very well, or you don't drink a lot, or that you don't drink at all. So, because alcohol does play a large, and I mean really big, role in social interaction in Korea. So, just when you first go there, for sure, within that first week, they're going to take you out to dinner. The entire staff are going to go out to dinner, and they're going to welcome you, and everyone's going to eat and get drunk. It's basically how most dinners go, really. So there's going to be a lot of people who are going to want to give you drinks. So that is why it's important to tell people that you don't drink a lot, or if you don't drink at all. But if you do decide to take drinks, there's 3 people that it is really important that you take drinks from, that you are served by, and that's your principal, your vice principal, and your mentor teacher. Those 3 people will offer you drinks because they're kind of like the ones who are responsible for you. Your principal and vice principal are obviously head of the school, so they will offer you drinks. Those you pretty much have to accept. It's not a good idea to turn those down. So even if you don't drink a lot, at least at your first dinner, at least take these 3. And then later on, just say you don't drink a lot. But it's really important that you start off on the right foot with your principal, vice principal, and your mentor teacher, because that will set the tone for the rest of your contract period. So just be aware of that. The other thing about culture within the school is that it's still very conservative. For as much as there's been a lot of social progress all over the world and in Korea as well, there's just certain aspects in Korea, and especially within culture, that is very conservative, and you will have to find a way to deal and compromise. One of the issues is regards to appearances, and that is if you have visible tattoos or a lot of piercings, you're gonna have to deal with that. Number 1, in EPIC's application documents themselves, it asks you specifically if you have tattoos in very visible areas. So anything on your hands, arms, I believe around your neck and your ear, but anywhere that can't be easily covered up, they'll ask you if you have tattoos. If you have them, please do not say no. Don't lie about this, because if you do, and they later on find that you have tattoos, that is actually grounds for breach of contract. They can actually terminate your contract for that. It might sound weird, and it might sound like it's unfair, but Korea is not very accepting of body modification, because teachers are expected to be role models and figures of authority, and tattoos and excessive piercings don't really play into that image in Korean society. So if you have them, you will have to tell EPIC that you do. You will have to tell them where and provide pictures, and you will have to sign. You will have to basically say, yes, I have these tattoos, and yes, I will cover them up while I'm working. It's not something that most people would be an issue, but it is, and because of the conservative nature of of Korean society as in this on this particular issue. It's just something you'll have to deal with. So if you do have like a half sleeve or a full sleeve, you will have to wear long sleeves. And if you have forearm tattoos, wearing short sleeves at school is kind of out of the option until you are more aware of how it will be received by the school. When you first start, if you have tattoos, just wear long sleeves. Even if it's summer, it might suck, especially if you're in the summer term because it gets very hot in Korea. But you will have to wear long sleeves. But as you develop and build on your relationship at your school, and then they kind of get to know you for who you are, tattoos might become less of a thing, right? Then if it's no longer a thing, then, world's your oyster, you know. And also, with regards to clothing, this is one of those things where it's just it might seem a lot like policing, unnecessary policing, but again, it's a conservative environment, and so there's certain types of clothing that are not really recommended to wear. For girls in general, low-cut tops and bare shoulders are generally out of the option. So like spaghetti straps, tank tops, and like low-cut V-necks, a lot of those are kind of out of the option. Until you kind of get a better idea for like what your school environment is like, what all your teachers are like. Once you get a better idea of that, just wear your church Sunday best is kind of how I like to kind of organize it. Like if you are going to a very formal event, just kind of think of it that way, and then eventually gradually dress down into more business casual as time goes by. Your teaching duties will essentially, assign you as the school's English teacher. So you'll be working with the official textbook. The material isn't the most entertaining thing on the planet. It's pretty dry. It's very, very wooden. It's very stiff. But that is what you'll have to work with. It's not a bad idea to break it up every so often. You can still, as long as you're able to stay within the curriculum, it's not a bad idea to kind of slip in a few, things like, contemporary news articles, some popular culture, also things about yourself as a person. As long as you can tie it back to whatever it is you're teaching that day within the curriculum, you can, it's not a bad idea to kind of give the kids a break from, just reading the textbook and just, saying and writing things out of the textbook and, tell them things about, different TV shows in wherever you're from, different music, things like that. And it'll also kind of build a relationship with your students as well, because that's also important. So that's something you will have to get used to, because in the private sector, they also have to work within the curriculum, but they have a little bit more freedom in terms of I guess, what kind of materials they can kind of incorporate into the lesson. That, I guess it might depend on the institution on its own, but for me, working with the national curriculum was probably like, it was so dry. It was incredibly dry, and it was just so textbook. And so there is, at the end of the day, private and public, they work together to still fulfill the needs of the curriculum. It's just what they use and how they go about it is a little bit different. Private tends to be a little bit more supplementary and expand a little bit more on what you learn in the school. But the school is for testing. You study for the tests. You study for your midterm, you study for your final, and then you study for your college entrance exams. So the English that you learn in the schools is geared strictly for testing. Private institutions will help supplement that, but how they go about it is just, I find it a little bit less wooden and less stiff. But again, I mean, because I haven't actually personally worked in the private sector, I can't really say that much on it. But yeah, kids will get really bored of the textbook material, so give them a break every so often. It's not a bad plan. This particular thing, what I'm gonna talk about next, is a little bit more geared towards people who are of Korean descent who are interested in teaching in Korea. Because there are a couple things that are slightly different. For one, especially if you're male, and either your family or you yourself have ever had Korean citizenship, either by birth or through heritage. If you're a male under the age of 35, you will have to check with the embassy about your nationality. Because if you have had Korean citizenship at any point, you are technically eligible for mandatory military service. So which means that if you're considered a Korean national and you're male, you are eligible to be shipped off to the military for 2 years. So if that's not a thing you are willing to subject yourself to, please check with the embassy or the consulate office first to verify your nationality status before you begin the application process. And for anyone who has been born abroad but their parents have once held Korean citizenship, you might actually also be considered a dual citizen. That is the case until you are, I believe, 18. After that, which point you will have to select one of your two citizenships. If you decide to go after your Korean citizenship, that will make things a little bit more interesting and slightly more convoluted in the application process. But because Korea does not recognize dual nationality, you have to pick one or the other. So if you decide, for example, if you're an American and your parents are permanent residents, but because you were born in the United States, you are considered American, you still have Korean nationality through your father because he has not yet obtained American citizenship. If that were the situation, you will have to basically inform the Korean government or the Ministry of the Immigration that you do not wish to keep your Korean citizenship. You will be taking your American citizenship, and you will have to report that. So that is an extra step you may have to take depending on the various, I suppose, residency statuses of your family members. The other thing is if you are considered to have had a Korean heritage, you are actually eligible for a different visa. It's called an F4 visa. It's a visa for people of Korean heritage. It requires different paperwork that is not entirely that you will have to apply for this visa separately because the documents that are required for it are completely different. But this visa is not dependent on employment. This visa, once it is issued to you, it is valid for 2 years. That's my knowledge. That's my understanding as of 2012. It may have changed, but the visa is not tied to any employment, and you can be in and out of Korea at will, and you can be gone out of the country for like a year and a half and still come back as long as there's time left on that F4 visa, and it is renewable. And again, it gives you a lot more freedom because if you decide that public sector is not good enough, I'm going to go into the private sector. You are work authorized by the virtue of your F4, and you could start working for somebody else immediately. You can actually get out of teaching entirely and go pursue a different career, and you will still be work authorized. So that might be something that you may wish to consider. The other thing about being ethnic Korean is that if you look Korean, everyone around you in Korea will consider you Korean. So they will consider you Korean first before they consider you American, Canadian, or whatever after. So that will make your experience in the school and your relationship and with your teachers and the people around you, that's going to be a little bit more bit different compared to those who are white or who are Filipino, Latina, whatever. Simply because they will consider you Korean. You look Korean, you are Korean. That's kind of like the mentality of it. So there's the relationship between yourself and your teachers will be a little bit more different. It'll be a lot more, I suppose, Korean in that sense. So because age means status in Korea. So the older person will always have certain, I suppose, privileges over those who are younger. So that may complicate certain things when it comes to your working relationship as well as your social relationship with other people in the school as well as other Koreans around you. So that will just require a little bit of extra vigilance in navigating your social relations when you're around those people. Because I myself am Korean and I'm a fluent Korean speaker. So when I was teaching in schools, a lot of my teachers tended to forget that I was the English teacher. Even though most of my kids didn't know my name and they just called me English teacher, amongst my teachers, amongst when I was with the other teachers, they never actually considered me Canadian, even though I consider myself Canadian. So when there were certain situations that came up in the professional setting that I was not in agreement with, they wouldn't understand why I wouldn't go along with it, because that's not something that I do and that's not something that is done, but that kind of caused a bit of a bump in the road. And so it's not always an issue. Eventually, the younger teachers will be able to kind of understand that you yourself consider yourself foreign as opposed to being Korean. But some of the older teachers may not. Your principal and your vice principal, they will be older, so they may not. So just be aware of that your social relationships and your professional relationships will be a little bit different compared to some of your colleagues who are American or who are Caucasian or whatnot. And overall, it's a good experience to get for people who wish to get to see if teaching is a thing, or who just want to get out and who want to explore. Teaching in Korea is an incredible experience. There are always pros and cons, and there are always situations that may come up that you didn't anticipate. But as long as you're open-minded and you're just willing to kind of go with the flow, there's a lot you'll learn about Korea. There's a lot you'll learn about life in general, about yourself, about a lot of things really. So anyone who goes, no one can really guarantee that you're going to have a good time. I mean, that's up to you, and that's up to the experience that you build for yourself. But no matter what, you're going to come away with something. Whether it's positive, negative, that's entirely dependent on you. But you're going to come away with something. It's going to be an experience, and you're going to meet people, and it's going to be an experience that will be unique, and at the same time you'll have shared that experience with a lot of other people. It will make connections for you, and it will be an experience. It'll be something that you will always be able to look back on and say, you know what, I did this, right? So that's pretty much what it is. And I would say working in the public sector was great, really. When I've spoken with others who've been in the public sector and also in the private sector, there's always moments of the grass is green on the other side, things like that. But regardless of whether you choose to go into teaching it in public schools or in private schools, there's going to be experiences, there's going to be people you meet, and You're all going to look at Korea together. You're gonna experience Korea through your own lenses, and it's honestly speaking, it's gonna be fun, one way or the other. Whether it's a good kind of fun, bad kind of fun, I don't know, but it's its own experience. It's unique, and if you decide to take that leap, just be ready to land on 2 feet and or stumble, and just figure it out from there, I guess.
All right, that was great. I have a question that someone brought up from the first discussion, and I
Hmm.
couldn't. I obviously I couldn't answer it very well because it had to do with the public school. So I'm gonna let you see if you can
Hmm.
answer it. They were Someone asked about the decline in rehiring foreign teachers for the public schools. How I guess the government has decided to not hire as many foreign teachers for their public schools. Do you know anything about this? I think it's from just been like the past 2 years.
Yeah, this was becoming a thing when I was leaving in 2012. That's when Epic decided to reduce the number of positions that were available. It's it is true that the number of positions that have been available have been reduced significantly, because it is my understanding that most of the positions in upper level schools, so middle school, high school, have reduced drastically. And so a lot of the positions are in elementary schools, and certain middle schools as well, because the people who are teaching in high school, middle schools and high schools are in a higher pay bracket, and that means you're paying them more because they have more education. A lot of those people either had a master's, has a master's in TESOL, TEFL, or they had a master's or PhD in education, or English. So that level of education demands more pay, and the at that time there were a few things. For one, the teachers union, the other just public opinion on foreign individuals in Korea took a bit of a turn. There were a couple events that happened, and the public opinion just kind of went the other way. So that kind of contributed to it. That is why the TEFL has become pretty much mandatory to apply to a lot of the public school to the public school programs, because it is incredibly competitive now. Um, there's people applying constantly inside Korea, and then you have people who are trying to come in from outside Korea. So it has reduced, yes, but positions are still available because this program is an important initiative and an important part of the path that the Ministry of Education wants to take in terms of their education, of like their curriculum. So I don't think the program is going away, but you just have to understand that it is intense competition. So you gotta have a good, solid, clean application, and you gotta find ways to stand out amongst others.
Yeah, that the other part of the question, I guess, just what I'm curious about is if they're getting rid of these positions completely, or if they're leaning more towards uh, native Koreans who speak English that can fill those positions.
Native Korean Korean teachers, do teach English
Yeah.
in schools. More of them, the positions have opened up more to them now because previously it's been closed to them as a result of all of the foreign the teachers who were invited to the country. In the public sector, they can cut those positions, and it's it it's not a popular decision, but it's not an unpopular decision as well. For Because there's also the fact that unemployment rate in Korea is quite high, and for a lot of new teachers, younger teachers coming in out of teacher school, they are finding that a lot of positions are closed to them because they're also competing, especially if they majored in English, specialized in English, they are competing with foreign native speakers. So, I guess in order to kind of balance things out, they have opened up more positions in higher level schools, so middle school, high school, to native English teachers. But the parents of these students, on the other hand, tend to prefer to have a native speaker teaching their children English because they believe that is English. That in order to learn English, like real English, they need to learn it from an actual English speaking person. So so it's kind of like the government has to balance between those two. So that's why for ethnic Koreans, it's a little bit harder for them in some ways for them to get into the private sector because these hagwons are providing a bit their model is a business model, and they're not going to generate as much revenue from parents or prospective clients if they have seemingly Korean people teaching English. Whereas in a school, that's not an issue. It's not a business model. So, but it has the environment has changed. So it's all about getting the jump and making sure your application stands out.
Yeah, I think definitely with the change in the public school, how the hiring is being handled between foreign teachers and native Koreans, I think anyone who's looking into just going into teach, whether it's public school or private school, really needs to do some research now. When I first went into it, I had no idea what was going on, and I just went in blind. But I think
Yeah.
people who want to go over now, they should probably do some research so that they know their options and which one they're going to have a better chance at getting.
Yeah, definitely. When I went over, like, it was like right at the peak of recruitment, so there were a lot of positions open at the time. And the program that I went through was a little bit unique in a sense, but currently I can't verify that program status at this time, so that's why I didn't really want to discuss it. If things get confirmed on it, then if I'm pretty sure anyone who has researched into EPIK will know of the program. It's called Teach and Learn in Korea, the talk program. It, like I said, I'm not quite sure about the status of the program at this time. The EPIK is also moving offices right now. Their new building is finally ready. So there's that. But nowadays, because of the reduction in positions, but there's surplus labor. That has also caused a bit of a situation where you can lowball people, the wages. So your how much you're earning now is not quite the same, like as what you're earning before. I can't say about the private sector because that's probably where some of the more lowballing is taking place because again it's a business model. Like I haven't actually seen contracts recently. I haven't. I still have a few friends who are working, but they've been there long enough, and so their pay is kind of steady. But in the public sector, the Epic's pays like amount how much they pay you hasn't really changed. Like because it's a government program, they have like fixed numbers and they have to stick with it. It might have gone down a little bit recently. I wouldn't be surprised. But when you have a lot of people, you know, you have you have low supply, high demand, things like that. It's all about supply and demand at the end of the day. So, but yeah, no, it has definitely changed. So if going to teach in Korea is a thing you're looking into, you really have to research all your options. Speaking with a recruiter, to get the ball rolling is probably not a bad idea because a lot of the recruiters have their ears to the ground for positions on both sides, and university positions to teach as professors in universities if you have a master's degree is also a viable option, and the pay on the university level is very good. You also get much better, you get so much paid vacation time because when the school goes on break, so are you, right? So you can get like a decent chunk of a summer break. So if that's a thing and you have the credentials and the qualifications, university is not a bad option to look at. But yeah, doing research is definitely a requirement nowadays.
All right, well, I think that's all the questions that I had or passed along.
Yeah. I mean, if anyone actually is interested in applying for the public sector, I do. It is my understanding Epic is doing their application cycle now. SMOE and I think Epic are all doing it as well. So it is. It's not too late to apply. You might not be able to get it in the most upcoming cycle, but for some of the future cycles, probably applications are not. They are probably being accepted and processed. If anyone has any specific questions, they can leave a message, whatever, and I'll do my best to get back to them and answer their questions as best as I can. But yeah, public sector is still a viable option. It's just you just have to be prepared for a lot of competition and patience, really, because there's a lot of people applying for this. Epic processes thousands of applications per cycle, so and there's a very limited number of people who are currently working as program coordinators that actually accept all of these. So just time, patience, and perseverance is probably your best bet.
All right, well, thank you very much. I think we're gonna cut this off before it gets too long.
Yeah.
All this great information, though. Um, Thank you for coming and sharing, and for everyone who's listening. Thank you for listening.